and gentlemen, a moment when I look at you, I feel as if we are at a dinner of bastards, and I'm going to be the bastard who will be eaten. Why do I say bastard? Foolish, because I think it would be foolish to imagine to do the synthesis of all the works, but the time to do the synthesis on the problematics of the employment is a time to look at the solidity of the construction of the bills, the walls of the National Employment Services. This tradition seems to be respected. When we look at the partnerships between the enterprises and the local employment services in the conference room of BOAD on September 7, 2016. There were two roundtables for communications. In the end, the meeting noticed around 12 quality intervention, and especially when we look at the ideas that were exchanged in these conditions, the exercise which is to draw conclusion of the workshop draws or forces the person who has to do that to a drastic, severe job. Now, having put myself under the demands of these things, I talked with Mr. David, and we said that we look at some things and we forget some of them that are more important. So you understood it. I will put my attention more on that communications than on others. This denotes the optional feature of the communication, so you are warned of the viability of the synthesis. The interest of this workshop, as we can see through the general problematic, is to allow the participants to share their good practices, to bring a good support to people in order to succeed in their recruitment. We can see that this workshop was done between local partnership in front of job seekers and national partners in front of enterprises. The objective was also to do to take the stocks of things, and in order to facilitate the recruitment, to see the institutional policies in which partnerships are tied and untied. Our works reached the objective. In order to know, let's follow the thread of this workshop, which brings us to this question: local partnerships in a single words. Let me do the things very quickly this way: the singularity of the partnerships and the multiplicity of the partnerships. The second column will tackle the important aspect of the thing. Opening ceremony. It started with the opening ceremony with the delegated ministry in charge of vocational training, His Excellency. The ceremony saw three interventions: the welcoming note of Mr. Komla Amuzu, director of the ANPE, the word of Mr. Nyanga Elenga, deputy chair of ASEP, and other words pronounced. And the opening speech of His Excellency the Prime Minister by his representative. The first thing was on the particularity of the participants. A way having been chosen, you cannot adopt others. This is what we can take as lesson out of what we have seen here. The liberalization of the labor market needs to have good institutions. Available tools. One of the available tools was shown through the works of Mr. Pierre from LOET France. He put the emphasis of the regional partnership. It is shown as a platform that brings together WhatsApp, civil societies, and African actors. We will keep that in order to set an ambitious and efficient partnership between the civil society organization and others. You need to have stable and flexible structures. The other tool available is the good budget management. On this issue, Mr. Philippe Bardieu presented the economic dimension of the local partnership. He revealed that the best partnership is the partnership with oneself. The Trojan horse of this is within the internal control. It is a control targeting the assessment of the risks. I'm trying to say things very quickly in order not to waste your time. He went further, making the parallel with the notion of the government of enterprises. On the second point, being question of modalities of financing, the orator presented it as being the whole of the donations made by public institutions. From the OECD, he presented the figures that were recorded in the framework of the public help to development. Mrs. Bernadette Thomas, in charge of the label Universcience France, put the emphasis of good governing systems. This presentation allowed us to talk about the City of Trades. We saw that the City of Trades call all our awarenesses. It satisfies the curiosity of the job seekers who need daily information. The need to have a place which is freely accessible to all the person looking for jobs. The intervention of Mrs. Bernadette Thomas was very interesting, letting us to know that the City of Trades has very clearly defined principles who are constraining and setting norms. The presentation of Mr. Francois Ekoko on this question, on this issue, said that there is a need to establish a South-South cooperation. The moderator imagines the institutional and technical cooperation. He proposes the cooperation to be economic. In this sense, the bid and the supply, the offer and the supply must be balanced. So, in all, the tools are necessary for the reinforcement of partnerships. ANPE come here as being national institutions stabilizing the needs for services provided to the people looking for jobs. Second part, the multiplicity of good practices. The good practices, we can identify the good practices of agencies and the good practices of agencies from abroad. First part, the good practices of local agencies. It means from Africa, South, North, and West. First, it is from Mr. Christophe Ngube Mambu, Director at the Cameroonian agencies, who brought his communication on the urban program in Cameroon. We'll retain that the creation of support committees to local employment is a response to one of the strong recommendations during the employment forum organized in Cameroon in 1995. The program is based on the use of a strong proximity labor hand and proposes itself through strong projects to insert many youth through rehabilitation, cleaning up works of social services in their cities. We understood it. The main purpose of this program is to fight against the youth unemployment through the creation of proximity jobs. To take a stock of this, we can say that this program allowed to insert 713 young people. Then we looked at the Ivory Coast programs. In other words, these agencies are convinced of the efficiency of the policies of territorializations in terms of territorialization of works. And finally, the good practices of the agency from Morocco, presented by Mr. Mohamed Ayoub. First, he talked about the mission of his agency, which is to play the role of intermediation between the employers and the workers. By 2020, the agency would like to be engaged in order to make sure all the job seekers are supported. For the rest, there are many good practices as well in Africa as in Europe. Second part, we saw the good practices from Turkey, France, and Quebec. The good practices from Turkey were presented by Mr. Ramazan, expert of employment in Turkey. The Turkish agency offers a placement service and consultancy service to job seekers. The agency also offers local institutions vocational orientation days in collaboration with universities and local training institutions. So in 2015, promotion days on SAN jobs were offered to 12,500 students with the objective to extend this initiative to the whole of the country. Then the strategy of Pôle Emploi France was presented, and thus joins again the issue of territoriality, efficiency, action, and readability. The model from Quebec was presented by Mrs. Guylaine Milodo, Director of Measures and Services of Job Placement in Quebec. That presentation went round the partnership. That model was built as a partnership between the state and the territorial organizations that are directly touched by the employment. Ladies and gentlemen, allow me to conclude this synthesis with the invitation to have a singular institutionalization which should allow us to share good practices and performances. I would like to end hoping that if I did not disturb you too much, you keep the need to stay in this country. Thank you.